Hi, I'm Micah Halpern. Thank you for joining me today as I do some thinking out loud. Our first segment is called Background Briefing. The first thing I've been thinking about is the conflict between Trump and Bibi. The President of the United States and the Prime Minister of Israel are as united now, today, this week, and last week, as they have been for the last several months, or years for that matter. They share a vision for the Middle East. The difference between them is in timing, and the difference between them is in personality. So, no, despite the headline-grabbing media hype, there has been no breakdown in their relationship. Their friendship has not eroded. Communication between them has not come to a halt. And while, yes, President Donald J. Trump and Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu did engage in a tense, heated telephone conversation, that conversation is par for the course. It's what happens. Calling Netanyahu crazy and telling him you'd be in prison if it weren't for me was Trump blowing off steam. He was upset, frustrated. It was his frustration over Bibi's decision-making vis-a-vis Lebanon and his fear that it was threatening negotiations with Iran. It was the juicy stuff, and the media and the public loved to exaggerate this into a huge conflict, but it wasn't. What's not so juicy is hearing that neither their friendship nor their communication was damaged because they disagree and because things got heated. Things get heated. World leaders disagreeing about world-shaping events, about safety, security, and otherwise, is perfectly normal. These two leaders are powerful and opinionated, and neither one of them likes it when they do not get their way. Neither one of them takes it calmly when there are obstacles placed in front of them, especially not when they had already made their positions clear to the other person. Trump told Bibi that there should be no more attacks in Lebanon because it was harming United States negotiations with Iran. That should have been clear. But Bibi told Trump that Israel needs to protect Israeli citizens, which means attacking Hezbollah targets in Lebanon. Think of their conversation, in essence, as an immovable force meeting an unstoppable object. Your choice as to who is immovable and who is unstoppable. The bottom line is that on this issue, there is no agreement, but know that this disagreement is not a big issue. It's not a breakdown in communications. In an interview with CNBC after the now famous or infamous expletive-filled phone call, Bibi lent context to their conversation. The Prime Minister said, "Sometimes we have, as in the best of families, tactical disagreements." He said, and I'm quoting again, "We always find a way to work them out, and we do so as great friends. We can disagree in the morning, and by the afternoon we have common actions." That's the end of the quote. To best understand their interaction, one must also understand that their styles of leadership are very similar. That similarity is one of the reasons why, at the same time, Trump and Netanyahu both get along so well and are so explosive with each other at the same time. Both of them are polarizing and dominating personalities who often improvise. They are team leaders, not team players. They are what I call reactive decision makers and sometimes impulsive. Neither Trump nor Netanyahu takes well to losing or to negatives. In this latest kerfuffle, Trump thought that Bibi had undermined him publicly by targeting Hezbollah in Lebanon. Bibi thought otherwise. Politics inside Israel after Hezbollah's strike at Israel from Lebanon. Bibi could not be seen as weak, and Israel had to strike back. These leaders will be managed neither by their advisors nor by one another. There is no difference between their goals, the goals of Donald J. Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu, when it comes to Iran and Hezbollah. They both agree that Iran is a real threat and Hezbollah is a serious problem. Netanyahu wants to protect. Trump wants a resolution. Their respective goals align. It is their tactics and timing that are out of sync. Trump wants physical outcomes brought about through quick negotiation and resolution. Bibi wants continued pressure until the threat is neutralized. Trump wants talks and agreements. Bibi wants continued pressure, which involve military strikes. It is a serious mistake for anyone, especially Iran and Hezbollah, to think that this squabble means that the Trump White House is wavering in their support for Israel. While their instincts differ, they are undeniably united in their goal, an end to the conflict. Trump is a deal maker. For the President of the United States, the conflict ends when he signs a terrific deal. Bibi is a protector. For the Prime Minister of Israel, the conflict ends when the threat is reduced and Israel is once again safer. He cannot afford the resolution, which is either incomplete or ends too early. For Trump, pressure rises along with the rising price of gasoline and, of course, midterm elections. And they're also hanging in the balance. And in Israel, too, upcoming elections are looming. And Netanyahu needs to prove that he is a protector that did not buckle under pressure from the United States. The political survival of both the president and the prime minister are at stake. The squabble was merely a distraction. It was a nothing. Coming up next, Points of View. First up is a column from Ynet published on June 5th, 2026, authored by Amin Ayoub, who writes from Morocco. He's very interesting and very insightful. It is entitled Missiles, Bread, and Water, How Iran Held the Arab World Hostage, subtitled Analysis. Iran's attack on desalination plants, airports, and energy infrastructure exposed the Gulf's vulnerabilities, disrupting food supplies, driving up prices, and threatening the livelihoods of millions from the Gulf states to Egypt and Jordan. Ayoun lays out a real strategy of Iran and the damage and pressure they bring to the region by striking at the infrastructure of their neighboring countries. This is how Ayoun begins. When the United States and Israel launched Operation Epic Fury on February 28th, most focused on the military calculus. Hardened bunkers, centrifuge counts, command and control decapitation. What was underestimated was Tehran's secondary target. Iran did not simply retaliate against American bases. It turned the civilian populations of the Arab Gulf and broader Middle East into instruments of pressure. The result has been a humanitarian and economic shock that is now reshaping the social fabric of every country from Kuwait to Cairo, from Doha to Amman, in ways that will outlast any ceasefire. Start with water. It sounds almost too elemental to be a war tactic, but Iran's early strikes on desalination infrastructure in Kuwait and the United Arab Emirates were not random. Desalination plants are the source of 99% of the drinking water in Kuwait and Qatar. When Iran targeted these facilities, it was not striking military assets. It was threatening civilian survival at its most basic level. The Gulf states that had spent decades building gleaming and skylines and positioning themselves as global hubs discovered that their entire physical existence rested on infrastructure vulnerable to a single adversary with ballistic missiles and motivation to use them. Now Ayoun moves on to food. The damage is frightening, and he writes about it. The food picture is equally alarming. The maritime blockade triggered what retailers across the Gulf Cooperation Council, the GCC, states describe as a grocery supply emergency. The region relies on the Strait of Hormuz for over 80% of the caloric intake, and by mid-March, 70% of the region's food imports were disrupted, forcing retailers to airlift supplies and resulting in a 40 to 120% spike in consumer prices. That means the cost of rice and cooking oil has doubled or tripled overnight. Ayoun explains the effects of the Iranian attack. It was an economic and business attack, he continues. Iran's targeting strategy was effectively an economic weapon aimed not only at the Gulf governments, but at tens of millions of working-class families thousands of miles away. But the cruelest dimension of the crisis is its reach into countries In Egypt, which is among the world's largest wheat importers, the government has already reinstated price controls on unsubsidized bread sold in private bakeries. In Jordan, which imports roughly 90% of its energy needs, fuel rationing has become a new normal. It's hard for us to imagine this, but what's happening, Ayun describes the huge food lines, especially for the farm workers who are there, which are tens of millions of farm workers. The irony is, as painful as it is instructive, ordinary Egyptians queuing for subsidized bread, Filipino and Bangladeshi construction workers sheltering from drones in Sharjah, Jordanian families rationing cooking gas. These people made no decision about the Iranian nuclear deal. They have no vote on the Abraham Accords or the architecture of the regional security. Yet they are bearing the cost of a war that was prosecuted in the name of regional stability. In conclusion, Ayun makes his point very clear. Hormuz must not be controlled by Iran! Exclamation point, exclamation point. He writes in conclusion, the strategic lesson here should register in every capital from Washington to Riyadh. Iran's geography is itself a weapon. Roughly 1/3 of the world's seaborne crude oil passes through the Strait of Hormuz, along with 1/5 of the global LNG, liquid gas. Any framework claims to have resolved Iranian threat while leaving that choke point under Tehran's potential influence has not resolved anything. It has simply deferred the next round of hostage taking. The Arab world spent years telling itself it could profit from modernization while outsourcing its security to Washington. Iran just proved that was never quite true. The 62 million people in the Gulf and the 400 million more across the broader MENA region are paying the tuition on that lesson in real time. This is a very disturbing and very essential information. I hope our leaders are listening to this column. Next up is a column from Ynet, written by Itamar Eichner. It was published on June 4th, 2026. It's entitled, Trump's Dilemma. Is Netanyahu becoming an obstacle to the Middle East? Subtitled, Analysis. Behind this week's tense call is a deeper shift in the United States Middle East strategy. After focusing on military pressure, Trump now wants deals, but sees Netanyahu's policies as growing obstacle. This is an essential question, and Bibi is walking a tightrope. This is how Eichner begins. U.S. President Donald Trump's public acknowledgement of details from his expletive-laden phone call with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu may mark a new low point in the relationship between the two leaders. According to reports, the call included sharp exchanges, shouting, and profanity, though some of those details have been denied. But behind the personal tension lies a much deeper dispute. Trump appears to have changed his Middle East strategy. In the past, Trump focused heavily on military pressure and deterrence. Now he wants to present a vision of agreements, diplomatic stability. From his point of view, continued fighting has become both a political and diplomatic obstacle. According to sources familiar with the regional contacts, several quiet meetings have taken place in recent months under U.S. sponsorship with the assistance of the United Arab Emirates. Here is where it gets very interesting, and Eichner explains how Trump reacted to hearing that Bibi was potentially undermining his process, his work, by potentially attacking Beirut. Eichner writes, when Trump heard Netanyahu's threat to strike Beirut, he and his circle genuinely believed the Prime Minister had lost control. Not as a figure of speech. They were truly concerned about his judgment and the policy he was leading. The problem for Trump is that, under current conditions, there is almost no Arab leader willing to advance a meaningful diplomatic process. That includes Netanyahu, even in the countries that were once considered more open to cooperation with Israel. There is now a serious political and public difficulty in doing so. In other words, Trump wants agreements, but his central partner in the region is struggling to create the conditions needed to achieve them. But things are in the works, says Eichner. Who knows what's going to happen in the future? So Eichner writes, in this context, attention has also turned to the U.S. Ambassador Mike Huckabee's decision to postpone the July 4th Independence Day reception in Israel by 2 months to September. Some in Israel see that as a hint at the possibility of a presidential visit to Israel around that time. Eichner asserts that Trump wants to help Bibi exit politics with honor. He concludes that, and in writing this is his point, he writes, one possibility is that Trump wants to arrange an honorable exit from political life for Netanyahu. Another is that he still believes the two have more political and diplomatic moves ahead of them. Either way, the relationship between the two leaders appears to have entered an especially sensitive period. For years, Trump was considered Netanyahu's most important ally on the international stage. Now, at least according to the latest signs, the US president wants to move from an era of wars to an era of agreements. And he is not convinced that the prime minister is moving in the same direction. The central question is whether this is a temporary crisis between the two dominant political figures or a deeper strategic shift. If Trump has indeed decided that his main goal is to reach broad regional arrangements, he may eventually have to decide whether Netanyahu is still his main asset in the Middle East or an obstacle standing in the way. This is quite a lot to think about. Thank you so much, Itamar Eichner, for an exceptional piece. Coming up, commentary through cartoons, where pictures tell the story. I want to show you 6 cartoons today. First up is a tease and a dig at the New York Times, asking Hamas to confirm information for an article. Of course Hamas is not reliable, but nonetheless they're asking Hamas as if they're a reliable source. That's ridiculous. Next up is Trump driving an Israeli rocket which Bibi is at the head of, pounding into Lebanon. This third cartoon has been a consistent theme. The United States strike against Iran and the battle over the Straits of Hormuz is complicated and has gotten more complicated. This cartoon is entitled Trump Grabbed Hormuz, Complicated Iran War Deal. This cartoon is entitled Trump's Headache. Iran is the cause. It's very funny. Next up is a cartoon which plays on the theme of The Wizard of Oz when the flying monkeys arrive. The cartoon is called Trump Sends Out His Flying Monkeys. Our fifth cartoon is Trap, and Iran is laying the trap for Trump, who's walking right into it. It's entitled Welcome to the Art of the Deal, which of course is a play on the best-selling book of Trump, The Art of the Deal. And Iran is out dealing them, it seems like. Finally, our last cartoon is entitled Trump versus Netanyahu in the boxing rink, and the caption reads, Rumble in the Arabic Jungle. It's a pun. It's supposed to rhyme. The problem is that the Iranians are not Arabs, and they do not speak Arabic. So the cartoonist really doesn't know what he's talking about. That's a shame. In a moment, more of my own perspective and a few predictions. German Foreign Minister Wadenful criticized the IDF's advancement deeper into Lebanon, saying this is a cause for serious concern. Any further escalation will increase the great tension and lead to further displacement of residents within Lebanon. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu announced that he has decided to appoint Shmuel ben Ezra as the head of the National Security Council and National Security Advisor to the Prime Minister. The Prime Minister's office stated that Ben Ezra brings with him more than 30 years of experience in defending the nation's security. He led the development project of the Arrow 3 interceptor, which won the Israel Security Award. In his last position at the Shin Bet, he served for 4 years as the head of technology, operations, and cyber division, equivalent to the rank of Major General. Ben Ezra has many years been serving and experienced working in government entities in the United States and around the world. He will assist the Prime Minister in strengthening Israel's security, diplomatic and economic resilience, and in advancing it as a global technological power. The Supreme Court, in a decision delivered by all the justices on the panel, that Justice Minister Yariv Levin must convene a judicial selection committee to appoint judges to district courts, prioritizing the district courts of Beersheba and Haifa. In an unprecedented move, Justice Minister Yariv Levin intends not to comply with the Supreme Court decision and will not convene a judicial selection committee. This is because Levin believes it is an illegal decision, in his words, so there will be no obligation to obey it. This is deeply problematic. Chairman of the Central Elections Committee, Supreme Court Deputy President Judge Noam Solberg, accepted the petitions against Ministers Yoav Kish, Miki Zohar, Miri Regev, and Yariv Levin, who filmed campaign videos in their offices. Justice Stolberg accepted the claim that filming in the minister's office is considered use of public assets that could potentially influence voters, and the content of the videos was intended to influence voters and therefore constitutes electioneering problems. The ministers were required to remove the videos and pay costs. Minister Kish was required to pay $2,500, Zohar and Regev were required 9,000 shekels, and Levin 11,000 shekels. A petition was also filed against Minister Dudu Amsalem, but it was deleted. Nevertheless, he was required to bear cost at 2,000 shekel. This is ridiculous not to think that filming an election video in your office is not going to exert influence. The Supreme Court increased the sentence of Hamad Hamadi, a Nazareth resident who was convicted of what? Maintaining contact with operatives and working on behalf of the Iranian intelligence service. Setting fire to vehicles and assisting in infiltration into Israel. They increased his sentence by 1 year. He was initially sentenced to 6 months in prison, and now the Supreme Court imposed an additional year imprisonment on him. Hamadi admitted to the charges against him. We've been thinking out loud about a lot today. Now that you know what I've been thinking, let me know what you're thinking. Email me at micah@jbstv.org. Tweet me at Micah Halpern. Tell me what you think. Before we end, let me leave you with one piquante piece of information. Guy Sassoon of Israel, together with his partner Niels Vink from Denmark, won another world championship in the wheelchair doubles tennis for quadriplegics. There is a 20-year age gap between Vink, who was 22 when they started playing last year, and Sassoon, who's 45. Yet their styles complement each other exceptionally well. The Roland Garros tournament, which is the Wimbledon of France, described them as a close-knit team with strong chemistry and shared ambition. Listen to the titles they've won together. They won the Australian Open 2026, their first Grand Slam title together on hard courts. Last year they won the Roland Garros in 2025 and won again this year, just this weekend. Their first Grand Slam title was at Wimbledon 2025. They won the US Open in 2025. We'll see if they win that again. They won Roland Garros, I told you that, in 2026. They successfully defended their French Open quad doubles crown, confirming that their 2025 success was not only a one-off, but making them back-to-back champions at Roland Garros, near a complete sweep of the Grand Slams. That's unbelievable. Between Roland Garros in 2025 and Roland Garros in 2026, they captured a tremendous amount. Just count them. Wimbledon, US Open, Australian Open, Roland Garros, Roland Garros. That's 5 consecutive major doubles titles, spanning all 4 Grand Slam events. In short, their partnership has produced 5 consecutive Grand Slam titles for doubles in the quadriplegic wheelchair championships, making them arguably the most dominant wheelchair doubles team in world history, certainly over the last 18 months. Watch this. It's impressive. No doubt about it. Thank you for thinking out loud with me, Micah Halpern. Let's think out loud again next week on JBS.